Oxford from the inside. The good, the bad, but always the truth.
Hello, welcome back to Oxford from the Inside, the good, the bad, but always the truth. I'm Laurel and I'm here today with Lola. Lola, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lola. I've just graduated from an English language and literature degree from Jesus College, Oxford.
Very nice. Lovely to have you on the podcast with me today. Me and Lola are at Jesus together on the same course, so she's had to put up with me for 3 years of her life. And it's still agreed to come back today. So today I'm going to be asking Lola one of our new quickfire questions, which is, what was the most difficult part of your application process to Oxford / the Oxbridge application process?
The most difficult part of my application process, by quite a long way, was my personal statement.
Really?
And you look shocked. And I think every time I've told that to people, they've been a little bit shocked by it. But I really struggled, more so than interviews, more so than the exam, the ELAT that we did. I think I've got this fundamental fear of talking about myself. I never know what to say. I always think, you got to do yourself up, but you don't want to do yourself up too much because you don't want to seem arrogant, and you don't want to. And I really struggled. And essentially, it was the case that I put my first draft in to the teacher that did all of the Oxbridge stuff, and felt I didn't even feel really like lacking in confidence at that stage. I was like, oh, it's fine, it's this part, and got it back and got pretty much slated. And then it became a huge thing that I was like losing sleep over and kind of completely overreacting about. And I think I went through about 7 drafts.
Seriously?
Of my personal statement.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Not proud of it.
4 in the end, which is still like quite an effort, but not 7.
For me, like 4 seems admirable. Yeah, and the final product, which I think probably is advice I could give to other people through this podcast. The final product is completely different to the one you first give. Mine more so, considering it went through 7 drafts, but not striving for perfection from the very first one you give back, because it won't be that, because you've never had to write something like this before. So I think maybe I was too attached to my first one, and at that case, when I got the feedback, I panicked, and then it kind of became a much more difficult thing than maybe it ever had to be. But it got to the stage when my form tutor kind of had to, she didn't write it for me, but she almost told me like, oh, well, what about this? And I was like, oh yeah, that, I hadn't even thought about that, but that's something that's really important to me. So I'd say another thing. Can I give advice? Is this...
Yeah, no, definitely, please.
Brilliant. Another thing I'd say is, because beforehand I'd been talking to the Oxbridge teacher, and that teacher didn't really know me. She'd never taught me. Or maybe she had taught me in year 9. And the second I went to my form tutor, who was a teacher who taught me for many, many years, knew what I liked outside of school, that was the most useful thing I think I ever did, because she basically told me who I am. And I was like, oh yeah, because you get in a stage when you're thinking about Oxbridge and what Oxbridge want from you, and you kind of forget what makes you you. And obviously it's a cliche, but they do want to see you. And so it was things, for me personally, it was at the time that I wrote my personal statement, I was doing my A-level drama piece, and I did a piece that I'd picked out, that it was kind of my baby. And it was a 3-hander Harold Pinter play called Old Times that I'm absolutely obsessed with.
Go check it out.
Go check it out. It's a brilliant play, and it's really weird and it's great, and it's I wouldn't say it's not canonical. Like, it's quite it's quite intellectual stuff, but it's not something I thought that Oxford would want me to talk about. But I spoke to my form tutor and she said, well, what are you doing? What are you doing at the moment you really, really like? And I said, well, every single time I go into that drama lesson, I get to Old Times, I just get this like zing and I love it. And she said, okay, then we'll tell them why. And in the end, a big paragraph in my personal statement was me talking about what it is about getting up on my feet and doing this play, which is an English text, but reinterpreting it as a text for performance that I've been doing, what it is, I think about that makes it so interesting and so different. And that ended up being my favorite bit of my personal statement, and something that when I look back on it, I'm really proud of what I said about that play, because I really meant it. And you say, I mean, it's going back to that point again, you say an awful lot of things which are what you think Oxford want you to say, like, oh, it's a very intellectual point about Hamlet, or that's a very intellectual point about Wuthering Heights, blah blah blah, and I'm bringing in Freud, but I really felt at the fundamental core of myself what I said about old times, which is what you want to do, I think.
Putting the personal in the personal statement is that's catchy.
I like that.
But it's also when you get to interview, I don't know if you got to talk about that in the interview, but having that actual enthusiasm about your personal statement and things in it is absolutely key when you hit the next stage. So you don't want to write this kind of formulaic what you expect them to want you to say, because if you then get to the next stage and you're like dead behind the eyes as you're reciting all the reasons why Hamlet is like the best Shakespeare or whatever, they can tell that that's not what you feel. So did you actually get to talk about that in your interview?
I didn't get to talk about old times, sadly, but they probably, if they had asked me about it, I would have gone on a awful tangent and they wouldn't have taken me. No, not at all.
Very much.
But I did get to talk about, one thing is when you really believe in something, you can actually fight your corner even when you get fought on it, and when they try and take you down. And I don't think you've probably talked about interviews on this podcast before, but you really shouldn't be afraid of standing up for something you think, just because an academic's telling you that, oh, maybe that's not right. So one of the things I put in my personal statement was about queer readings of Gothic texts. So Frankenstein and the Picture of Dorian Gray and things like that, kind of across different centuries. And I remember an interview being challenged on it, and I can't remember exactly what they said, but I remember getting a bit cross. I remember they were trying to take me down on something, and I was like, no, like, I know that Victor Frankenstein and Henry Clavell were a little bit like, they had a bit of a thing for each other, and I stand by that. I think they did. And I think it's also an interesting part of the text, which adds to the way that you look at Frankenstein as this kind of, Victor Frankenstein building this great big perfect man. So yeah, I think that it's really good to have things that you believe in, because then you can fight for them and you can stand by them.
Yeah.
And that's really useful. And they can tell, like you say, they can tell.
The kind of fire in your eyes as you're talking about it.
Yeah.
So the kind of more formulaic elements of the personal statement, I know you said you struggled with composing it, but how did you start the process? Like what when you sat down and you were like, I need to write a personal statement now, what was your first kind of step?
Yeah, I remember I started with the things that were outside of books that I'd read, because I knew that I could put down all these points we've been talking about so far about Hamlet or Frankenstein or whatever, but I started with what things that I had about me that were different. So, for example, whether or not that's, you write poetry in your spare time, or you're a member of the National Youth Theatre. I never was, but some people are. Lucky for them. You could be. And if you're a poet, or if you're, there's a million things. If you're a sports person, even if it's completely not anything to do with your degree, something you're really proud of that is away from academia, that oftentimes you can relate it, and that would probably be the next step to keep the flow in your personal statement. Say like, oh, my time on the track has given me something, blah blah blah. Like, that's maybe kind of naff, but
no. But it's the common thread throughout the statement is you. So those elements, like you say, is all creating this kind of picture of you that they then go, actually we really want this person to come and study here. Like this is an interesting person and they have interest.
Because I can see them as a person and not just a reading list.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I started with those things that were me as a person, and from there, you know, that, like you say, through line of you brings you to the academia and all that kind of other stuff that you need in there, but is that only serves as the kind of the backdrop to the shining star that is you. You know, that only serves to feed into their image of who you are.
Yeah. No,
You come first.
lovely. You come first.
Put yourself first.
Hype yourself up is what we're saying for the personal statement. Do not get to 7 drafts and still not back yourself, because obviously Lola's personal statement was stellar. She has completed her Oxford degree.
I did. Somehow.
I was thinking, so extracurriculars I got kind of stressed about. So I kind of was derisive about personal statement being the hardest part for you, sorry. But genuinely, when I started writing it, I was like, I haven't done anything. Like there's people writing about like when they composed this like opera from this text that they'd done at school, and I was there like I like books and I've been to this person talking about this, but that's not really relevant. And it's just, as you say, anything that can feed into that wider narrative. So what kinds of things before, kind of in the build up to writing a personal statement and around that time, were you doing as like you're pushing beyond just the curriculum?
There's, I mean, obviously, because of the things that I'm interested in, I watched a lot of plays, ones that, like, you know, recorded ones. I went to go and see them, you know, if I could, and comparing them against each other and thinking about them when I was watching them, and talking about them with people, I think was one of the most fantastic things. So in the Oxbridge process and all those weeks when I was creating personal statements and interviews and whatever, luckily I have a fantastic mum who listens to me just waffle on about things, and you know, and she's great, and she listens and she engages in the conversation. And whether it's your mum or your friends, people in your A-level classes, whoever it is, talking and getting their opinions and debating about them is a really important thing. And other than that, I mean, there's so many resources of things you can go to in those kind of weeks to beef up, you know, so you're not just what you're doing in your classes, you're also doing all these extracurricular things. So I remember one of the things they brought us to was the In Our Time series of of radio sort of podcasts. They're great and they're really fun and they're really accessible. There's go and speak to your teachers. I remember speaking to my teachers not long before and kind of saying, like, what can you point me to? Is there anything you think? And I remember one of them was like, do you know what post-colonialism is? Now I can't get away from post-colonialism. But at the time I was like, I don't know what that is. So I went on Wikipedia. And it's not always going to be interesting to you. It's not always going to be your thing. Sometimes you're going to look at something that someone's given you or something you found. You can be like, that kind of bores me. That's not a bad thing. Then don't do it. Find something else. Find something that's really exciting to you. But yeah, it can be academic, like the podcasts and the radio productions and the books. But it can also just be looking at things that you do every day anyway, and thinking about how you can make those things kind of impressive. You know, whether or not it's video games, and you've got, I mean, there are some people in our English course who, for their dissertation, there was one person who did video games, wasn't there? And wrote an entire English dissertation about a video game. And you know, I mean, that's amazing. You know, it shows that it's not just things that you have to go out of your way to do. It can also be things that you love and you do anyway. Taking those and bringing them to a next level, just thinking about them differently and seeing what interesting things you can think or say. Movies, video games, board games, whatever.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think so. We don't have a lot of time left. Sorry, I have kept you far too long already. But so, horror of horrors. if you had to go back and write your personal statement again, what would you do differently? What advice would you give to yourself?
I have one thing that's very specific. And I'm thinking, I wonder if I can make a wider point about it. I realized when I was talking to you just now, my extended project, I wrote this. You've read it. You know what I'm talking about.
It's so good.
I wrote this like really, I mean, how would you even begin to describe it? It was like, it was almost trashy. This kind of romance play that was just sensational.
Mills and Boone.
Yeah,
energy.
it was a real Mills and Boone play. And it was fun. It was overlong, and it wasn't. I'm not a playwright, but I wrote it for my extended project, and I never talked about it in my personal statement. And by the time I probably wrote my personal statement, I wouldn't have finished the play, but I would have been in the process of doing all that extended project stuff. And I think I wish I'd kind of written about that, but I think maybe to make that a wider point, I think maybe I was embarrassed about how Mills and Boone it was. I think maybe it was another one of those cases of I just thought it was something that Oxford wouldn't be interested in. So instead I put probably something that was a little bit more bland. But looking back, I think that's something that is kind of fundamentally me. I think I watched ITV's Victoria at too young an age, and it had a fundamental effect on my mentality. But the Oxford tutors should know that, and they probably know that now, having done shoots with me for 3 years. Yeah, they will. If they don't know about it in your personal statement, they will find out about it when they meet you. So don't hide it. Don't even hide it from the beginning.
So your advice is you can hide nothing. So
you have no secrets.
No, but for real, don't feel that it's not Oxford worthy. If you're interested in it and you love it, and that's why you want to study that subject, because it's all interrelated, and you're like, hot damn, this is my favorite thing. I love this. Put it in your personal statement, and don't worry if somebody's like, that's not exactly what Oxford want. At the end of the day, it's yours, and you might want to take a bit of advice, some kind of with a what's the phrase? My brain is completely blank. Fine tooth comb, is that a thing? Somebody going through it. Fine tuning. Thank you. Fine tuning it all, making it sound more like the basic experiences and interests you have. There's a certain level to which you can spin them to sound more impressive or whatever, but fundamentally it is a personal statement, and you should be happy with it when you send it in. And also don't spread it too much, because as soon as you start there, if anybody ever reads you a segment of that personal statement ever again, you are going to feel so humiliated and embarrassed that it doesn't even matter. So
yeah, 100%.
Don't reread it after the first year of uni is my advice. That's all for now. Thank you so much for coming and talking to me, Lola, and thank you everyone for coming and tuning in. I hope this was at least a little bit helpful with all your application stuff happening now, and obviously the off-T channel, always post your comments and everything. Everyone will try and get back to you. It can be a little bit of a stressful time, but just try your best. Be yourself in very cheesy terms.
It's cheesy because it's true.
It is true. Yeah, thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Good luck.